When Star Trek fans think of Starfleet vessels, images of elegant explorers like the Enterprise immediately come to mind. Ships built for diplomacy, discovery, and pushing back the boundaries of the unknown. But what if Starfleet built something completely different? What if, in the aftermath of the Borg invasions and the devastating Dominion War, Starfleet decided that exploration alone wasn't enough? What if they created a vessel designed specifically for combat operations, capable of deploying entire wings of starfighters while serving as a heavily armed command platform? This was the Typhon-class. Unlike the Galaxy-class, Sovereign-class, or even the Defiant-class, the Typhon occupies a unique place in Star Trek history. Originally created for the Star Trek video game, Star Trek Invasion, which released in the 2000s, the vessel was envisioned as Starfleet's answer to the carrier warships commonly seen throughout science fiction. Yes, we are referencing Battlestar Galactica. At the centre of this story is the USS Typhon, an experimental prototype commanded during its most famous mission by none other than Lieutenant Commander Worf. While the ship never appeared on screen, the Typhon still remains one of the most popular, non-canon Starfleet starships ever created. Its unusual design, massive fighter complement, and connection to one of Star Trek's most beloved characters have helped it endure for more than 2 decades. Today, we're taking a closer look at the Typhon-class, exploring its technical specifications, its unique role within Starfleet, and why this forgotten carrier remains one of the Federation's most fascinating starship concepts. If you want to keep up to date on all the latest Star Trek news, lore, and more, then make sure to hit that subscribe button to never miss a video from the team here at Trek Central. You can also follow us on social media for daily updates on the Star Trek universe. Did you know we're enjoying making these Star Trek videos on various topics, and we hope you are too. If you want to support their development, please join our Patreon via the link below. You'll get exclusive access to videos and events, as well as more Galaxy-class rewards. As always, please do let us know your thoughts in the comment section below, because if you're talking about Star Trek, then we want to hear about it. Okay, engage! Before we continue, today's video is sponsored by our friends over at the Cargo Bay, our partner store for officially licensed Star Trek collectibles. Now, to celebrate a video all about Mr Worf's forgotten flagship, we've actually got this. This is a Latinum edition Worf Mini Masters figure, and we're giving one away to one lucky viewer. It's actually beautifully detailed and it's 1:12 scale. It's a statue based on Worf's appearance in Star Trek Deep Space Nine. You can check these out on the link below or enter to win one. It's complete with his bat'leth, making it a fantastic addition to any Star Trek collection. If you'd like to enter and have a chance of winning this, simply follow the instructions linked in the description below and make it so. Okay, let's get talking about starships right now. The Typhon-class was unlike virtually any other vessel in Starfleet service. For centuries, Starfleet's doctrine focused on multi-purpose starships. Whether it was the Constitution-class, Galaxy-class, or Sovereign-class vessel, Federation ships were typically designed to perform a wide variety of missions. This ranged from exploration, scientific research, diplomacy, humanitarian relief, and combat. They were all expected to be handled by the same platform. The Typhon-class represented a dramatic departure from that philosophy. Developed during the late 24th century, shortly after the Dominion War, the Typhon-class appears to have been designed around a single purpose: force projection. Rather than carrying a handful of shuttlecraft, the vessel functioned as a dedicated carrier capable of deploying an entire squadron of advanced starfighters into combat. This allowed Starfleet to extend its reach across a battlefield, while maintaining a powerful command and support platform as the centre of operations. Currently, only one example of a class is known to have existed, the USS Typhon, carrying the registry NX 85808. Of course, the NX designation is significant. Throughout Starfleet history, if you did not know, the NX prefix has traditionally identified experimental vessels or prototypes. This includes the NX-01 Enterprise, the original USS Defiant prototype, and most recently in Star Trek canon, the USS Protostar. All of these carried NX registries before their technologies became more widely adopted. Of course, the NX registry strongly suggests that Starfleet viewed the Typhon as a testbed for a new form of warfare, rather than a fully mature class intended for immediate mass production. Of course, the Typhon-class immediately stands out apart from traditional Starfleet starship designs. At first glance, the vessel barely resembles a Federation starship at all. Most Starfleet vessels are dominated by a large saucer section connected to an engineering hull for a graceful neck structure. the Typhon abandons almost all of these conventions. Instead, the vessel features a compact central hull built around internal hangar facilities and tactical systems. The ship's broad, heavily armoured profile gives it the appearance of a military installation rather than an explorer. Perhaps its most distinctive feature is the 4 warp nacelles. These nacelles are mounted directly to the rear section of the vessel, creating a silhouette unlike anything seen elsewhere in Starfleet. The arrangement gives the Typhon a powerful and aggressive appearance, reinforcing its role as a combat-orientated vessel. Of course, many would compare the vessel to the Typhon-class due to its compact profile and forward-facing design philosophy. However, while the Typhon was built as a fast attack escort, the Typhon was designed to operate as a centerpiece of larger fleet actions. In many respects, it resembles a mobile starbase more than a traditional starship. But of course, the vessel still retains several familiar Starfleet features. A navigational deflector is positioned beneath the forward hull, while docking facilities and support systems allow the Typhon to operate alongside conventional Federation vessels. The result is a design that feels both recognisably Starfleet and completely unique at the same time. The defining characteristic of a Typhon-class was its extensive fighter facilities. At a time when most Starfleet vessels carried only a handful of support craft, the Typhon was capable of housing 28 Valkyrie-class starfighters. These fighters were stored within dedicated internal hangar bays, supported by sophisticated launch and recovery systems. Rather than just relying on a single launch area, the vessel utilised multiple deployment points, allowing starfighters to enter combat rapidly and efficiently. This dramatically increased the operational flexibility of the ship, and allowed it to maintain a constant presence on the battlefield. For Starfleet, this represented an entirely new way of thinking. Now of course, the Federation had previously utilised small combat craft, particularly during the Dominion War. Peregrine-class attack fighters, and I hope I pronounced those correctly, participated in several engagements, while larger vessels often carried Starfleet runabouts and shuttlecraft for tactical support. But the Typhon took this concept much further. Instead of simply carrying fighters, the vessels also built around them. Every aspect of this ship's design supported carrier operations, from maintenance facilities and pilot accommodations to command and control systems designed specifically for fighter coordination and fighter warfare. This transformed the Typhon into one of the most specialised vessels ever developed and deployed by Starfleet. Although the Typhon's starfighters formed its primary offensive capability, the carrier itself was far from defenceless. In fact, it may have still been one of the most heavily armed Starfleet vessels of this era. The ship mounted numerous pulse phaser turrets, multiple phaser arrays, and an impressive collection of quantum torpedo launchers. Unlike many Federation vessels that relied on broad phaser coverage, the Typhon emphasized concentrated defensive firepower. This made perfect sense given its tactical role. A carrier would inevitably become a high priority target during any major engagement. Protecting the vessel, and by extension its fighter complement, was absolutely critical. As a result, the Typhon was equipped with enough firepower to defend itself against large-scale threats, while simultaneously directing fighter operations. The vessel effectively combined the functions of a carrier, command ship, and defensive fortress into a single platform. Perhaps the most unusual capability of the Typhon-class was a unique system known as Fortress Mode. When activated, the vessel would enter a defensive configuration designed to maximize survivability during heavy combat. The hangar bays would seal shut, vulnerable systems would be protected, and the ship's structure would effectively transform into a hardened battle station. While Fortress Mode prevented the deployment of starfighters, it significantly increased the Typhon's ability to withstand enemy attacks. Defensive turrets could then be operated directly by personnel aboard the vessel, allowing the ship to focus entirely on self-defense while weathering incoming fire. Now, this concept feels almost like something from a dedicated military science fiction franchise, Battlestar Galactica, rather than Star Trek. Yet it remains one of the most memorable aspects of the Typhon's design. Even today, Fortress Mode is often cited as one of the reasons the vessel stands out among Starfleet's many experimental starships. Of course, no discussion of a Typhon-class would be complete without examining the fighters it carried. The Valkyrie-class starfighter was developed alongside the Typhon and formed the backbone of the carrier's operational doctrine. Fast, agile, and heavily armed for its size, the Valkyrie represented one of Starfleet's most advanced fighter platforms. The craft was specifically designed to operate from the Typhon's internal hangars, allowing pilots to launch rapidly and engage threats far beyond the range of a conventional starship weapon. As the events of Star Trek Invasion unfold, multiple Valkyrie variants are developed, each introducing new technology and tactical capabilities. Some versions focus on heavier armor and enhanced firepower, while others incorporate advanced systems inspired by enemy technology encountered during the campaign. Together, the Typhon and Valkyrie formed a complete carrier warfare system unlike anything else in Federation history. As we'll soon see, Starfleet would need every advantage it could get. This is because the USS Typhon found itself at the center of one of the strangest conflicts of the late 24th century. While the Typhon-class itself was an ambitious experiment, only a single vessel is known to have entered service. This being the USS Typhon, registry NX-85808, as we mentioned. As Starfleet's prototype carrier, the Typhon served as both a testing platform and an operational vessel. By 2377, the ship had been assigned a squadron of newly developed Valkyrie-class starfighters, and was operating under the command structure of Lieutenant Commander Worf. For many fans, this alone makes the vessel noteworthy. It essentially is Worf's flagship. By this point in time, Worf had already established himself as one of Starfleet's most respected tactical officers. He had served aboard the Enterprise D, fought during the Klingon Civil War, helped defend Deep Space Nine throughout the Dominion War, and commanded the USS Typhon during some of the Federation's darkest hours. The Typhon represented the next stage of his career. Rather than commanding a traditional starship, Worf now found himself overseeing one of Starfleet's most advanced military experiments. And before long, both Worf and the Typhon would find themselves facing a crisis unlike anything Starfleet had encountered before. Now, the events that brought the USS Typhon into history began in the Titan system. Starfleet had lost contact with a Sovereign-class starship known as the USS Sentinel. This vessel was commanded by Captain Marcus Brennan. The Sentinel had been investigating mysterious archaeological discoveries when communications suddenly ceased. The Typhon was dispatched to investigate. Accompanying the carrier was Valkyrie Squadron, a group of elite fighter pilots operating the carrier's advanced strike craft. Throughout the mission, players of Star Trek Invasion would take control of one of these pilots, experiencing the unfolding crisis from the cockpit of a Valkyrie fighter. Now, you are probably wondering, why do we send an experimental warship? I'm also wondering this. Initially, the mission appeared straightforward. Simply locate the Sentinel, determine what happened, bring the vessel home, and there you go. Of course, things quickly became far more complicated. Upon arrival, Starfleet forces discovered growing instability throughout the region. Romulan starships were being attacked, Federation vessels were coming under assault, long-standing political tensions were beginning to flare across multiple sectors. Something was deliberately pushing the Alpha Quadrant towards another conflict. One of the reasons the invasion storyline remains so memorable is the sheer scale of the threats facing Starfleet. Throughout the campaign, Valkyrie Squadron found itself engaged against a remarkable variety of enemies. Of course, Borg forces remained active following the events of the Dominion War. Renegade Cardassian factions continued operating in the chaos left behind by the collapse of the Dominion's control. Romulan military units appeared throughout contested regions. And then we have pirates, raiders, and other hostile forces emerging across multiple sectors. For the Federation and Starfleet, it felt as though every crisis in the quadrant had erupted simultaneously. As the Typhon moved from one emergency to the next, evidence slowly began to emerge that all of these seemingly disconnected incidents were actually linked. Some unseen force was actually manipulating events behind the scenes, and that force would soon reveal itself. The true enemy of the campaign was a species known as the Kamjatae. Ancient, highly advanced, and incredibly dangerous, the Kamjatae had spent centuries hidden from the galaxy. Their origins trace back to one of the most important events in Klingon history. Over 1,000 years earlier, the Klingon Empire had been invaded by the Hur'q. By the way, if you played Star Trek Online, you may have encountered the Hur'q. The Hur'q devastated Kronos, looted countless cultural treasures, and nearly brought the Klingons to their knees. Among the artifacts stolen during the invasion was perhaps the Empire's most sacred relic, the Sword of Kahless. Even centuries later, the memory of the Hur'q remained deeply ingrained within Klingon culture. The Kamjatae were revealed to be the descendants of these ancient invaders. Their return carried enormous implications, not only for Starfleet, but for the Klingon Empire as well. To Mr Worf, the conflict was no longer simply another Starfleet mission, it had just become personal. As the investigation continued, Starfleet eventually discovered the source of the growing crisis. The colossal structure, known as the Vanguard Complex, This immense installation served as a cryogenic preservation facility containing thousands of dormant Kamjatae. For centuries, the species had remained in stasis. Now, they're slowly awakening. The Kamjatae intend to reclaim the territory once held by their ancestors and pave the way for the return of the Herc themselves. Of course, to achieve this goal, they required something extraordinary. This was an interspatial rift, something we've seen throughout Star Trek quite a few times. By opening a stable passageway between dimensions, the Kamjatae hoped to bring the Herc back into the galaxy and launch a full-scale invasion of Federation space. And of course, unfortunately for Starfleet, they had already found the perfect tool to help them achieve that objective. This was the missing USS Sentinel. The disappearance of the Sentinel was no accident. During its early investigations, Captain Marcus Brennan and his crew had encountered an ancient Kamjatae artifact. Exposure to the device corrupted the crew and gradually brought them under Kamjatae influence. Instead of serving Starfleet, Brennan became an unwilling participant in the enemy's plans. Under this influence, the Sentinel carried out attacks designed to destabilize the region, provoke conflict between major powers, and prepare the Alpha Quadrant for invasion. The vessel's actions initially appeared random. In reality, every incident served a larger strategy. The Kamjatae wanted chaos. Of course, a fractured Alpha Quadrant would be easier to conquer, basically taking a leaf out of the Dominion's books. As Worf and the Typhon uncovered the truth, stopping the Sentinel became one of their highest priorities. Throughout the campaign of Star Trek Invasion, Valkyrie Squadron repeatedly proved the value of the Typhon-class concept. The fighters defended Federation colonies, while escorting civilian transport, engaging Borg vessels, protecting Starfleet task forces, and conducting reconnaissance missions. They struck targets that would have been difficult or impossible for larger starships to engage directly. Time and time again, the carrier and fighter doctrine demonstrated its effectiveness. The Typhon provided command, logistics, and heavy firepower, but the Valkyries provided speed, flexibility, and striking power. Together, they formed one of Starfleet's most versatile combat groups. All of these capabilities would soon be tested during the conflict's final stages. And yes, it really does sound like we're talking about Battlestar Galactica. As the Kamjatae plan approached completion, the stakes escalated dramatically. The Vanguard complex began preparations to create the interspatial rift that would allow the Herc to return. If successful, Earth itself could become one of the first targets of the upcoming invasion. The final battles of the game campaign saw Valkyrie Squadron launch repeated attacks against Kamjatae forces, ultimately fighting their way through increasingly desperate resistance. At the center of the crisis stood the corrupted USS Sentinel. As the situation deteriorated, Captain Brennan finally broke free from the influence controlling him. Recognizing the devastation his actions had caused, Brennan made a final decision. Rather than allowing the Kamjatae plans to succeed, he ordered the Sentinel's destruction. The sacrifice helped close the interspatial rift and prevented the Herc from returning. With the Sentinel destroyed and the Vanguard complex neutralized, the invasion collapsed. The Kamjatae were ultimately defeated and Earth was saved. Of course, the Alpha Quadrant just avoided what would have become another great catastrophe in Federation history, literally just after the Dominion War. Following the defeat of the Kamjatae, the USS Typhon emerged as one of the heroes of the conflict. The carrier design had successfully demonstrated the effectiveness of its own design philosophy, proving that dedicated fighter operations could play a significant role in modern Starfleet warfare. Yet, despite this success, the Typhon-class never entered large-scale production. No additional vessels are known to have been constructed. Whether Starfleet abandoned the concept due to cost, changing priorities, or returned to a traditional exploration-focused doctrine remains unclear. But the legacy of the Typhon endured. For fans, the ship became one of Star Trek's most beloved non-canon designs. For Worf, it represented another chapter in an already legendary career. And for Starfleet, it remains one of the most fascinating what-if experiments ever conceived. While the Federation ultimately returned to its traditional approach, the Typhon-class proved that Starfleet was willing to think very differently when circumstances demanded it. Now, unlike most of the starships we cover here on Trek Central, the Typhon-class didn't actually originate from a television series or film. As mentioned, this starship was created specifically for the 2000 PlayStation video game Star Trek Invasion. This was developed by Warfrog Games and published by Activision. Star Trek Invasion arrived during an interesting period for Star Trek Deep Space Nine, as it had recently concluded. But Star Trek Voyager was still on the air, and fans were eagerly anticipating the future of the franchise following the Dominion War. The developers clearly wanted to create something different from traditional Star Trek games. Rather than placing players on the bridge of a starship, Invasion focused on fast-paced starfighter combat. Players would spend the entire game piloting the newly created Valkyrie-class fighter through large-scale space battles inspired by classic arcade flight simulators. Of course, this was a problem as Starfleet didn't really have any carrier ships. Unlike franchises such as Star Wars, Battlestar Galactica, or Wing Commander, Star Trek had never established a dedicated carrier platform capable of deploying large numbers of starfighters. The developers needed a mothership for the Valkyries, so they created one, and that ship became the USS Typhon. And that starship became the USS Typhon. When examining the Typhon-class today, it's easy to see how heavily the design was influenced by the gameplay requirements of Star Trek Invasion. The vessel needed to feel larger, tougher, and more militarized than traditional Starfleet ships. It needed extensive hangar facilities, and it needed visible weapon emplacements. But most importantly, it did need to look like a vessel that could operate as a mobile military headquarters. The result was something that felt surprisingly different from most Federation designs of this era. The sleek optimism of the Galaxy class and the Sovereign class was gone. Gone also was the elegant exploration-focused aesthetic that defined many Starfleet vessels like Voyager. Instead, the Typhon looked practical, purpose-built, almost industrial. It's one of the reasons the design has aged remarkably well. Even today, more than 20 years later, the ship still feels unique among Starfleet vessels. Unfortunately, Star Trek Invasion is often overshadowed by larger Star Trek video games, but the Typhon-class still proved surprisingly popular with fans. I think part of this comes down to its own role. The idea of Starfleet operating a dedicated fighter carrier simply feels different. This isn't just another battleship. For decades, Federation ships were designed around the philosophy that one vessel should be capable of performing almost every mission imaginable. Look at the Enterprise D. The Typhon challenged that concept. It represented specialization. This was a vessel designed primarily for warfare, but not like the Defiant. It wasn't built to explore, it was made to immediately stand out by deploying fighters. Now, the association with Mr Worf also helped cement its legacy. Even though Mr Worf was never shown commanding a vessel on screen, the idea of Starfleet's most famous Klingon serving aboard a massive carrier resonated strongly with the community. Over time, the Typhon developed a reputation as one of the most interesting lost Star Trek starships. Over the years, STO has become one of the franchise's largest sources of expanded starship lore, bringing numerous obscure designs into a shared setting alongside canon vessels, all taking place in the 25th century. The Typhon-class was no exception. In Star Trek Online, the concept was reimagined as a Typhon Command escort carrier. Rather than simply recreating the original design, the STO team expanded upon the idea and adapted it for the game's 25th century setting. This was introduced in the Heritage Bundle. The result is a vessel that feels like a natural evolution of the original prototype. Star Trek Online has had carriers before, so it kind of fits in nicely. The STO version retains the carrier philosophy that defined the Typhon, while modernising its appearance and capabilities. The design incorporates contemporary Starfleet aesthetics seen throughout the game's 25th century fleet, while preserving the distinctive DNA of the original vessel. Like its predecessor, the STO Typhon functions as both a carrier and a command platform, capable of deploying advanced fighter craft while providing support to allied vessels. In many ways, this interpretation answers the question left behind by Star Trek Invasion. This being, what would happen if Starfleet did continue developing a carrier based on the Typhon prototype? I think the STO version provides one possible answer. Naturally, one question frequently raised by fans is whether the Typhon-class could ever appear in modern Star Trek. The answer is actually more complicated than it might seem, I personally think. From a design perspective, realistically, there is little actually preventing it. Modern Star Trek has become increasingly willing to incorporate legacy concepts from novels, games, and reference materials. The challenge, of course, comes from Starfleet's philosophy. Even during times of war, the Federation generally prefers versatile starships over highly specialized military vessels, apart from the Defiant. The Typhon was designed during an era shaped by the Borg and the Dominion War. Two conflicts have forced Starfleet to reconsider many long-held assumptions. As peace returned to the galaxy, Starfleet may have simply concluded that dedicated carriers weren't really necessary. Then again, history has shown that Starfleet rarely abandons good ideas forever. I mean, even the Defiant was abandoned and then pulled out of storage, so you never know. Of course, in Star Trek, with threats continuing to emerge across the galaxy, perhaps there still is a place for modern carriers within the Federation fleet. But what do you think? Should Starfleet field a carrier? Maybe, maybe not. The Typhon-class remains one of the most fascinating starships ever created outside of Star Trek's traditional television and film canon, aka what happens on screen. Born from the video game of Star Trek Invasion, the vessel introduced an entirely new concept for Starfleet, this being a dedicated carrier capable of deploying fighter squadrons while serving as a heavily armed command platform. I'm looking at you, Battlestar Galactica. Through the events of Star Trek Invasion, which is a great game and you should play it, the USS Typhon helped prevent a catastrophic threat to the Federation and carved out a unique place within Star Trek lore. And thanks to Star Trek Online, the design's legacy continues to this day. But what do you think? Should Starfleet have continued developing carrier vessels after the Dominion War? Could a modern version of a Typhon-class fit into canon Star Trek? Or was the Typhon simply a fascinating experiment that was never meant to be repeated? Now, as mentioned, if you do enjoy our Star Trek videos, you can support the development of Trek Central's videos. Please join our Patreon via the link below. And hey, if you join, you actually get this really cool pin badge, so make it so. Like always, if you want to keep up to date on the latest Star Trek news, lore, and more, then make sure to hit that subscribe button to never miss a video from the team here at Trek Central. You can also follow us on social media or join our community Discord server. For now, I've been Captain Jack, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Live long and prosper, my friends. Goodbye.